that this House do now adjourn. The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm glad to have the chance to continue tonight pressing for badly needed investments in predictable, ongoing, and significant investments in deeply affordable housing, with a real focus tonight on co-op housing. It's critical because we are in a housing crisis. And in that crisis, one of the reasons for it is that Canada has the lowest percentage of deeply affordable social housing stock in the G7. It's about 3% or just over of housing stock across the country, about 650,000 units. Even if we were to double our social housing stock, we'd still be the middle of the G7. It's clear that we're not going to solve the housing crisis unless we get more deeply affordable housing built, and co-op housing, of course, is a big part of this. Now, in the past, we used to do this well. Back in the 80s, for example, in the 70s and the 80s, we got 60,000 co-op homes built. As one example, Madam Speaker, in 1982, 8% of all rental units constructed across the country were co-ops. It was about 6,500 units that year alone. And it's investments like that every single year that led to the construction of co-ops like Brighton Yards in Uptown Waterloo that I lived in for 6 years. Brighton Yards is a deeply affordable, dignified housing with a strong sense of community. And there are many others all across Kitchener, including in the riding I represent. There's Asgard Green in Cherry Park, Bread and Roses downtown Kitchener, Willowside Co-op on Victoria Street. It's clear we need to get back to building co-ops every single year. But instead what's happened is the federal government has stagnated in funding co-ops, and as a result, construction has stagnated also. In 2020, for example, it was less than 1% of all rental units constructed were co-ops, about 477 units. Compare that, a far cry from the 6,500 built back in 1982. And so it's pretty clear we're going to need to continue to apply more pressure for this government to commit significant annual and predictable investments in co-op housing. Now, the good news is that because of that pressure from housing advocates across the country, this government did propose a significant new investment in Budget 2022. It was $1.5 billion. That was over 2 years ago, Madam Speaker, that funding was announced. The government hasn't actually built any co-ops with that funding yet. The money has still yet to flow. It's funds that could have built 6,000 units across the country. I last asked about this in question period in mid-April. Here's what the Executive Director of the Co-op Housing Federation of Canada, Tim Ross, had to say, quote, "We have shovel-ready projects at risk of missing the 2025 construction season. Co-op housing is just the type of housing we need more of to ease the affordability crisis. The federal government needs to launch the program in the coming months so that together we can create more co-op homes." End quote. My question for the Parliamentary Secretary tonight is, can he explain to Canadians what is delaying these funds being rolled out? And then can he go on to answer, when will these funds get spent so that these needed co-op homes get built in my community and across the country?
I'm sorry, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food. I'm sorry.
Thank you to my colleague from Kitchener for his question. I'm always pleased to share information about how our Government of Canada is taking concrete action to help build more homes faster, a key part of our work to ensure fairness for every generation, Madam Speaker. For decades now, cooperative housing has provided affordable housing and caring communities for Canadians. That's why the Government of Canada is supporting the cooperative housing sector to grow and become more resilient. With Budget 2024, we've proposed a number of measures that will benefit cooperative housing providers and the families that they call these communities home. First, we propose to enhance the Affordable Housing Fund with an additional $1 billion top-up. This brings the fund to $15 billion, and we encourage cooperatives to continue to access to build units and repair existing ones. We also propose to protect and expand affordable housing by creating a new $1.5 billion Canada Rental Protection Fund. This fund will provide loans and contributions to help housing providers to acquire units that will be rented out at an affordable rates and to preserve rents at a stable level for decades to come. It will prevent those units from being redeveloped into out-of-reach condos or luxury rental units. We also propose to keep not-for-profits and co-op homes affordable by introducing a new flexibilities to the Federal Community Housing Initiative. This will ensure eligible housing providers can access funding to maintain affordability for low-income tenants and co-op members. Finally, our new Canada Greener Homes Affordability Program will help housing providers to make energy-efficient retrofits that will help them and their tenants. In addition to these initiatives specifically designed for not-for-profit and cooperative housings, we announced a number of measures that will make it easier to get affordable housing projects off the ground. For example, the $400 million top-up to the Housing Accelerator Fund will help more local governments to cut red tape and make the changes needed to get more housing built faster. Our investments to boost the productivity capacity of the construction industry will ensure that Canada has the worker and innovative technologies needed to scale up supply. Starting 2024-25, we plan to invest $100 million over 2 years to encourage Canadians to explore careers in the skilled trades and help create apprenticeship placement. And our new $6 billion Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund will help communities build the essential infrastructure needed to support more homes and more vibrant and livable neighborhoods, including with cooperative housing. The Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada supports our plan, and I quote, "We recognize and support the important federal commitment detailed in today's plan to ensure cooperative housing is part of the supply response to this generation's housing crisis," end quote. While not part of Budget 2024, I would also like to note that the housing plan launched just ahead of the budget includes a $1.5 billion cooperative housing development program developed with the CHFC and will commence this summer. The program will build capacity with the co-op sector and support sustainability of this housing, and it's an effective and affordable model that has stood up to the test of time. Madam Speaker, we're there for co-op housing, we're there for Canadians, and we'll continue to support building co-op housing across Canada. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that the Parliamentary Secretary for Agriculture at the end of his remarks got to the question of this investment. Now, the issue is that this investment was committed 2 years ago. It's been 2 years since this government finally announced they were going to get back into the business of building co-ops, and they haven't actually built any. We are in a housing crisis. This is not a time to be spending 2 years talking about getting co-ops built. It's time to actually get them built. Could the Parliamentary Secretary at least comment to share some explanation to Canadians of what has happened over the last 2 years, that this investment was committed, and 2 years later, nothing has gotten built yet? Even better, can he share when the funding will flow so that in my community and others across the country, we'll see new co-ops getting built, which I know is what he wants to see happen too?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the honourable member talks about the last 2 years. We've been at the table since 2015, since we came into power. I know for a fact co-op housing has been a major priority for our government, and I know for a fact because I've lived it in my own writing. Co-op housing under the previous government was on a downward scale. We've increased funding for co-op housing, and I can tell for a fact that we've built over 30 units based on that co-op housing funding, because we chose to invest in housing, and we will continue to choose to invest in housing. And of course, we can pinpoint the fact that we made an announcement. I would invite my honourable colleague to speak to the minister. I'm not sure which project he's talking about, but you don't build a home in 2 months. There's obviously conditions that come into play, and I know for a fact that my honourable colleague would understand that, and I would invite him to contact the minister to talk about his specific project. Thank you so much.